Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, brought to you today by Josh Edison and Dr. M. Dentith. Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. I am Josh Edison, there, Dr. M. Dentith. We are co-located in Auckland, New Zealand. Yep, within actual spitting distance, but let's not do that.
Instead, let's French kiss instead.
Well, when the camera's off. But it does mean we both get to play with this magical little mixing boardy, sound effecty doodad paid for with the sweat and toil of our good patrons.
Or the stolen money. I mean, how you get your money is entirely your business.
Yeah, no, I don't judge. So, yeah, it does everything. It's a podcast in a can. And if the can was shaped like a box with dials and buttons and stuff.
Plus, it does mean I can now censor everything Josh says. Just say something.
Okay. And it did work very well, but the problem was video, it didn't actually anyway. Yeah, no, but sure.
That was disgusting and vile.
Yep. Yes, so there we go. We have our magical new piece of kit, which, if you're watching on video, is why we're canned up. We've got these sweet, sweet cans.
It's true. We are canny.
Yes, so that we can hear what we're saying without you hearing what we're saying, but hearing what we're actually saying. I don't think I've explained that correctly.
No, but I'm actually thinking more the fact that canny is a really, really bad punny joke, and I should not have said it, and I apologise to both the watchers and the listeners of this VOD/podcast for engaging in humour which is unbecoming of an associate professor.
Yeah, and an associate professor you are. So yes, we're here in Auckland.
I am still here in Auckland. Josh, prove I'm still here in Auckland in a way which also produces sound. Bite my hand or something.
If I'm not... I don't know if that comes across on the microphone.
No, not really.
It just gave me an excuse to punch an iWatch, though, which is what
Oh, you've been waiting for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah. So very long.
So yes, I'm still here. I will probably not be here come the middle of February. I'm receiving my visa at the end of next week and then making my plans for leaving the country. So could be gone as early as beginning of Feb or the latest by the end of Feb. I've got 2 weeks of quarantine to look forward to when I arrive.
Right.
And then at some point towards the end of Feb, I'll be in an office. And then the question will be, will I be recording from the office or from home? Because then we've got time zones to deal with. And time zones are going to be very, very weird.
Time zones are tricky monkeys. Yeah, so anyway, that's a problem for another time.
It is indeed.
Just have to sort that out when we come to it. What else? This is episode 299. Now, if my mathematics serves me correctly, that means next week is episode 300.
God, I wish you'd told me we were going to do math. I would have got some paper and done some calculations.
Right, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure.
If we carry the 1, divide by pi, use an irrational number, and then calculate the distance between the Earth and the Moon and Mars, I think that does mean that, yeah, next week is episode 300.
Right, we'll have to do something special for that then.
Oh, but the trick is we already have.
Dun, dun, dun.
God, I wish I'd actually
put
a
dun, 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 dun sting. Damn.
I actually should have put one in there.
Yeah. Maybe next week.
Instead, I'll just go, here we go.
Fine, that'll do. Yes, so
we actually do need a long-standing dun, dun, dun sound when we don't have other sound effects. So the problem with this mixing deck is that we've got a whole bunch of buttons here. So we've got a button to play the intro, a button to play the outro. We've got a button to play the intro to the patron bonus episode, a button to play the outro to the patron bonus episode, and then basically 2 spare buttons which when we're doing a Lord Morrissey. Morrissey will be the intro and outro to that. This week, of course, I could have had a dun 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 plugged in, but I didn't think of it. And basically, I'm just regretting a lot of life choices this week. An awful lot of life choices.
And then also we have yet another patron, I understand.
Yes, although this is someone who hasn't paid for the full reveal of their patronage. So all I can say, M, because you've got a first name that starts with that letter, is that we're onto you. And we're only onto you because you're giving us money. So frankly, this plot of yours is not working out.
And I think that's all we have to say before we do the actual episode. And what an episode!
Yes, it's a What the Conspiracy episode where this week I introduce Josh to hopefully a conspiracy theory he's never heard of.
Yes, hopefully. And I'll do my best to act surprised if it turns out to be one that I have heard of. But shall we just get straight into it and avoid any sort of suspense?
Yes, I think that means I need to press this button here. Now, as is traditional with our What the Conspiracy episodes, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. When did this conspiracy occur? Or at least when is this conspiracy theory said to have occurred? Since, of course, we may or may not be talking about a warranted or unwarranted conspiracy theory. I want a where. It's a where in the world. So I will say it's an Earth-based conspiracy. Just in case you're worried about the universe being immensely large, it is a conspiracy theory based on Earth. And I want a time frame. So when in time? I think that was actually covered by the first thing I said.
It was, yes.
But you can tell me twice because, frankly, I might forget, as I did the first time. And then I want what kind of conspiracy. So when, where, and what.
Yeah, well, now, see, last time I was in this position, I was frighteningly accurate with the when and the where and was completely off with the what when, as I recall, I assumed it would be something to do with cheese. So I think that the only sensible thing to do would be give you the exact same answers I did first time because they worked so well the first time. I mean, that's logical, right?
Now, the thing is, this eventually is going to work in your favor because you were frighteningly accurate and, spoiler alert, there's actually more to the Gowrie conspiracy than initially led on. So eventually, if you give those answers, you'll be right. But will you be right this week?
Well, I think there's only one way to find out. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 16th century.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's still in England. And as for the kind, I was off with the cheese. So I think I'm going to have to, is it a yogurt-themed conspiracy?
Sticking with the dairy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me tell you where, which is technically Australia, although technically he's doing an awful lot of work. When? It's the 20 or 21st century.
So it still continues to this very day?
And, well, no, I mean, it's kind of answered now,
Okay.
if indeed it's real. And it's a literary mystery.
Literary. Ooh, I
Yes.
read sometimes.
That's a bold-faced lie, and you're saying it to my face.
Yep.
Well, it's not being bald, which makes it a lot worse.
Not even bald-faced, actually.
So today I'm going to tell you the tale of Todd Noy, a Perth-born Australian Pulitzer Prize-winning sports journalist who, amongst other works of fiction, wrote the 1989 book Drago, On Mountains We Stand, a published piece of Rocky IV fan fiction which details Ivan Drago's life after Rocky IV, including his fall and his rise. Do you know about Todd Noy?
I do not. None of this sounds familiar at all. I'm not hearing a conspiracy yet, though. But I mean, please tell me more about the further adventures of Ivan Drago.
First of all,
already.
We probably should talk about how much we stand Dolph Lundgren on this podcast.
Yes, Dolph Lundgren, he is the bee's knees.
And not just because we appreciate his fine attempts at acting in a variety of straight-to-DVD films and straight-to-streaming films in recent years. Dolph Lundgren was a Rhodes Scholar. He's an actually quite smart man.
So was a chemical engineer?
Yeah, who just happened to get into a relationship with Grace Jones, became a model and then an actor, and now is probably nowhere near as successful he would have been if he'd been a chemical engineer.
Well,
It's kind of hard to tell with
how do you measure success?
a Hollywood C-lister. I mean, because we love
And also,
Dolph Lundgren.
like, Swedish martial arts champion in whichever particular...
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He actually might be doing... I mean, I suppose it depends on whether he'd become, say, associate professor as a chemical engineer after his Rhodes Scholarship. But no, we love Dolph Lundgren on this podcast. He might be almost as good as heartthrob Rutger Hauer. But of course, the thing about Dolph Lundgren, which unfortunately Rutger Hauer doesn't have, is that Dolph Lundgren's alive.
He is.
And Rutger Hauer allegedly is quite dead.
That was a bit of a shame.
Now, people may not know this, but I used to write short fiction, and I once submitted a piece of fiction to Rutger Hauer's website, which he selected to come out in an anthology, which was never published. So technically, Rutger Hauer knew who I was.
Well, there we go. Didn't know who I was, and neither does Dolph Lundgren, as far as I'm aware.
Well, we should get Dolph Lundgren to also put forward a fiction anthology, and then you can write something. And then Dolph will know who you are, Rutger will know who I was. No, actually, that kind of works in a temporal sense because he's dead. Anyway, we're getting off things.
I think we are a little bit. Yeah, it's not about what you or I may have written. It's about what was his name?
Todd Noy.
Todd Noy. Right. Tell me about him.
So, well, actually, let's talk about the book. Drago, On Mountains We Stand.
So is it an actual a published book?
A published book. You can buy it online.
Dang.
Well, actually, no, you can't buy it. Well, actually, no, you can buy it online, but you can also get it from the Noy estate. And it's kind of unusual because it is a piece of fan fiction based on the ending of Rocky IV, although apparently it's no longer in canon with the rest of the Rocky films, including Creed II, which actually deals with Drago's son and Rocky's kind of adopted spiritual son in respect to Apollo Creed's son. So yeah, so On Mountains We Stand, or Drago On Mountains We Stand. Now the book starts with the following opening. The following work is a gross abuse of copyright. Names, places, and events have been unchanged. I have done this with the firm belief that a king's story is more important than the literary regulations I flaunt. Now, this book has numerous 5-star ratings on Goodreads, and it's referred to as Noy's final masterpieces. Now, quick question. How long do you think this book is, and how many chapters do you think it has?
Right, well, I do happen to know that the longest single work ever produced was a work of fan fiction. I can't remember exactly who it was fanficking about, so I'm going to guess it's maybe 4,000 pages long.
Interesting. Do you know how tall a 4,000-page book would be? We'll come back to this, so don't answer now. The book is 80 pages long and features 67 chapters. Indeed, sometimes it has more than one chapter per page.
Okay, keeps things brief. I like it.
It is. Now, Drago On Mountains We Stand has been mentioned in articles on Rocky IV in such magazines as Sports Illustrated, and used to be referenced on the Wikipedia page for Rocky IV, although now it's been relegated to the page on Ivan Drago, because of course Wikipedia has a page on Ivan Drago. Wikipedia lacks many important pages on things that actually do exist, and has many unimportant pages on things that don't exist.
Yes, I can't remember who it was, suggested the pastime of wiki groaning, which is where you look up a real world topic and then look up a fictional topic that's sort of similar, and then groan at how much more work was put into the fictional ones, such as, looking up the Wikipedia page on fencing and then looking up the Wikipedia page on lightsaber fighting styles, and it's a little depressing. Yeah,
Wikipedia is very interesting, both from a philosophical and capitalist perspective, but we won't get into Wikipedia right now. So, an odd fact about Drago On Mountains We Stand. So not only is it a published piece of fanfic, which is quite unusual in fanfiction world, it's also got a rather unusual history of procurement. So if you go and look at those Goodreads pages on Drago On Mountains We Stand, most of the reviews suggest that people did not buy the book, but rather they found a copy in a weird place, such as when they were hiking in the Andes and they found a copy in a hut, or they're given copies by complete strangers.
Right. Do we know, I should ask at the start, does this book actually exist?
Yes, it does.
So we do have physical proof that it exists as a thing.
If you go to the Noy Estate website, you can order copies of Todd Noy's books, and they will be delivered to your house, and you can read them. In fact, if I'd had time, because I thought by the time we got around to this episode I'd be overseas, I actually would have ordered a copy to present it to show you the book actually does exist. Now, the big question, first of all, is who is Todd Noy?
Well, yes, you said he's an Australian writer.
Well,
is this a pseudonym?
Let me give you the Goodreads bio of Todd Noy. this is Todd Noy. Todd Noy was a prize-winning sports journalist from Perth, Western Australia. He has written for VFL Weekly, The Guardian and KO magazine. His novels include Okerdike, March of the Noxmen, House of Fiego, The Alabaster Wars, and Drago, On Mountains We Stand. His short works include Limey and Me, Letters to Dante, and Gout. Noy disappeared in January 1992 after a long battle with drug and alcohol addictions. Presumed dead, a memorial service was held in his honour in Perth in December 1995. He is survived by his two sons, Marlon and Quince, and his beautiful long-term partner, English cellist Elizabeth Harrington. Through the tireless efforts of Marlon Noy and Robert Wallace, the Noy estate has painstakingly restored and continues to release limited editions of Todd's classic works, including Noy's semi-autobiographical, previously unreleased volume, Swarmer.
Right, well that doesn't sound overly outlandish.
Now, interesting note, the Alabaster Wars, which does not survive in its entirety, is thought to be at least 4,000 pages long.
I see.
Now, I'll go back to that question I asked at the beginning. How big do you think a 4,000-page book would be?
I'm guessing a metre or two off the ground.
It would be the height of a door.
Right.
4,000 pages is a lot of pages.
It is, yep.
It also would not be a book you could produce with a usable spine. Actually, talking about that, did you ever watch Garth Marenghi's Dark Place?
No.
So Garth Marenghi's Dark Place is a Channel 4 comedy series about a Stephen King-esque writer, although he's of the firm belief that he knows writers who use subtext and their counts.
Right.
So everything he does is very straight on the nose. And Dark Place is meant to be a kind of TV adaptation of the kind of stories he produces. And he talks about producing a single volume of all of his works in one bound volume, which comes installed in a special vise, because there's no way the book can actually exist spine-wise without being clamped the entire time. So people have thought about producing books of this length, but no. The Alabaster Wars appears to be almost impossibly long, but because the book does not survive in its entirety, it's not entirely clear in what form it was meant to initially have been presented. Some other interesting facts. Old Okerdike, which is one of his books, is an oral novel, so it was actually never in print, and it's based upon a classic outback fireside story.
So how do we know it exists?
Because it's attested to by the Noy estate and by Noy experts.
I see, okay.
Another interesting note, Todd Noy has... Don't look up Todd Noy.
I'm not looking up Todd Noy.
Good.
I'm looking up something else, don't worry.
Okay, good. He had an honorary degree from the University of New Delhi. And kind of the weird thing is that he wrote original fiction. His original fiction is said to be very good, but for some reason his masterpiece is a piece of Rocky IV fanfic.
So I was just looking up the world's longest fan fiction, known as the Subspace Emissaries World's Conquest. It's currently over 3.5 million words.
That's a Super Smash Brothers piece of fan fiction, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's based on Super Smash Brothers. It's apparently 3 times as long as Marcel Proust's À la recherche du temps perdu, 6 times as long as Infinite Jest, and 13 times long as Ulysses. That's a fact you know now.
It's true. You're never going to be erased that fact. Never going to be erased? You're never going to be able to erase that fact from your heads now.
Anyway, do continue.
Now, as I say, most people seem to get their copies of Drago on Mountains We Stand from other people. It's also not clear who the original publisher was, but the Noy estate now, as stated in the Goodreads bio, is producing copies for people to purchase, because with Noy being dead, presumably the copyright has returned back to the estate, and they're simply handling all of this work. And because Noy is dead, we don't really know why he wrote Drago on Mountains We Stand.
Right, I mean, this is all slightly weird, but not outside the realms of possibility. I'm still not hearing a conspiracy theory though yet.
Okay, well, let's talk about who is promoting Noy.
Okay.
So we've got the Noy estate, and we've got the lawyer for the Noy estate, which is one Robert Wallace, who is a barrister working in London who works for the Noy estate. And the Noy Estate recently released a Lost Noy novel by the name of Swarmer, which is available to purchase from the Noy Estate website. But otherwise, when you start looking into Todd Noy, you start looking into the world of Todd Noy expertise, the people who research and try to find lost Noy works. And there are two major rival Noy experts, one David Allat and one Robert Smith. Not that Robert Smith, a completely different Robert Smith.
I was going to say.
Now, Allat, like most people who are fans of Todd Noy, got his first copy of Drago on Mountains We Stand from a tramp on a day where he was feeling almost suicidal.
Obviously.
So he's having a wander, he was a teenager, having a wander around his town. A tramp came up to him and said, "You look pretty glum, mate, you should read this book." And the book apparently changed his life and then made him into a Noy expert who went around trying to... You are looking at me as if I'm making this entire story up.
I am looking at you like that, yes. But it's all written down, so I'll take your word for it.
Now, both Allat and Robert Smith claim to have expert inside knowledge of Noy's work, including having had access via the Noy estate to previously unseen Noy extracts. So David Allat was able to reveal parts of Swarmer before it was actually released, showing he does have some contact with Robert Wallace and the Noy estate. And they are both rivals going back to their younger days when they were competitors in shuffleboarding in the UK.
Obviously.
Because I did not know competitive shuffleboarding was a thing.
Oh, competitive everything is a thing, I think.
Now, Swift owns a pub that Noy used to frequent when he was working for The Guardian in London. This place is called the Queen's Head, and they sell a Noy-inspired pie, the Piccadilly pie, which was apparently a kind of pie that Noy used to enjoy when he worked in London. And Swift has contact with at least one of the children of Todd Noy, Marlon Quince, who visits the pub with some regularity. And as I say, both Allat and Swift have a very long-standing rivalry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, again, weird, not overtly conspiratorial.
Okay, well, here's some additional facts. Noy's books often come signed, which is a bit of a problem since apparently he died in 1992.
Okay.
Noy can't have won a Pulitzer because the first Australian to win a Pulitzer was Nathaniel Brooks in 2006, which is once again after Todd Noy's death.
Okay.
Anyone who's done any research into Todd Noy can find no copies of articles written by him in any magazines, including The Guardian, which does have a search engine which allows you to go back into the early 90s and late 80s to find out what articles they had in print.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
There is no University of New Delhi.
Right. You'd think there would be.
There is no Australian folk story called Old Okerdike.
That you know.
That anyone in Australia knows.
Righto.
As I said, a 4,000-page book would be as tall as a door. Also, apparently, parts of the Alabaster Wars, which David Allat read, were partially written on toilet paper.
Hmm.
The law firm in London that Robert Wallace is said to belong to does not exist.
So we got more. It's not just Noy that doesn't exist. We have suspicions that more than one person doesn't exist. Are you going to tell me that I don't exist at the end of this? Because it feels like that's where we're headed.
Well, I mean, I'm going to have my own doubts about whether I exist. Finally, everyone who's ever reviewed or written on Noy is connected to one man on social media.
I thought you were about to say is dead. And I was really worried.
And that is Noy expert David Allat.
Okay. So am I to assume then that people have suggested that Todd Noy doesn't exist and that the entire backstory is just a way for this one guy to peddle his fan fiction?
Yes.
Right. Is it his rival who says this, but then the rival is the one who also nevertheless claims that Todd Noy existed? I'm very confused.
David Allat and Robert Swift may not be good friends, but they are acquaintances who don't have the rivalry that they make out to have.
I see.
So now surely the question now is why?
Yeah. that is a question.
All right. Well, what other questions do you have?
One is one, I
That's not that.
suppose. It's sort of a
That's more of a sound than it's a question.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So okay. If I'm getting this correctly, we have an author who has a whole backstory and a fairly detailed one,
And published books.
and published books,
Now,
all of which
I should
seem to be
also point
nonsense.
out, people who have read Drago on Mountains We Stand say it is actually an excellent novel.
Oh.
So it's not just a bit of fan fiction where mythology has risen around it. People say it is actually a genuinely good book. And the recently released Swarmer is also said to be very, very good indeed.
An 80-page book with 67 chapters.
Yeah, but it is punchy.
It does. It sounds like something somebody put up on a blog, one post at a time, and each post became a chapter or something.
No, it was not.
So is it then the rest of the literary world are the conspiracy theorists, and their theory is that all of this is a fabrication, just to make some dodgy fan fiction or high quality fan fiction more marketable? Is that what's going on here?
Well, no. So basically the story of Todd Noy is the story of David deciding one day, under encouragement by friends, to actually write a bit of Rocky IV fan fiction. And his plan was he wanted someone famous and associated with the boxing world to then claim they'd got a copy of the book and then get that famous person implicated as the actual writer of the book. So the initial plan was they really actually wanted to give a copy of Drago and Mountains We Stand to Dolph Lundgren, on the notion that they go, look, here's the book. Don't say you didn't write it, but at the same time allow people to assume you did write it. What a fun luck that would be. But unfortunately, they had no way of actually getting in contact with Dolph Lundgren. So Mike Tyson, who was in the UK at one point, they thought, we'll give it to him. And this basically failed completely. So David tried to get close to Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson's bodyguards went, this guy looks weird, and basically wrestled him to the ground. So he was never able to pass the book on to Mike Tyson to try and make him appear to be the author of a bit of Rocky IV fan fiction.
Is Mike Tyson one of those people that they talk about who has bodyguards because if he ever punched someone in the face, he'd probably take their head off?
I have a feeling that might be why he has bodyguards, not to protect Mike Tyson, but
to protect Mike Tyson from manslaughter charges. Yes.
Well, yeah, amongst other things which they have failed to protect him from, but that's another matter entirely. So basically what David then did, and I'm now going, actually not entirely sure that I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, he then gave copies of the book Drago and Mountains We Stand to friends, without actually saying that he was the author. So he decided that he would invent an author, and actually went with Todd Noy because it sounded like a really, really amusing name. And then basically his friends and other acquaintances started playing a game. So they started reviewing Drago and Mountains We Stand on Goodreads and developing this mythology around Todd Noy, which eventually then went to the point where people started editing Wikipedia to put references on there. And that was basically where it stood until two Australian podcasters, Alexei Toliopoulos and Cameron James, who had previously run a film review podcast, then went, there's this really weird reference on the Rocky IV Wikipedia page about a book about Ivan Drago, apparently written by an Australian author, which we've never heard of, so we're going to investigate this. And so they did this podcast called Finding Drago, where they're initially trying to track down any information about Todd Noy in Australia. So they call the National Archives, they ring up anyone with the last name Noy, they talk to people in Perth, they start doing research into folk stories and the like to find if they can get any collaborating evidence. And they basically don't find anything. And then they get in contact with the Noy experts, and they very quickly come to the conclusion that the Noy experts are basically leading them along. So this is a fascinating case of something which started out as a game and then became a conspiracy when people started investigating it, because the people behind it, notably David and Robert, thought they'd be able to fool the two podcasters into believing Noy was a real person, despite the fact that, as the two Australians pointed out, there was no evidence of Todd Noy ever existing, and all of the collaborating evidence that was meant to show that Todd Noy was a real person didn't exist at all.
Okay, against all probabilities, that actually makes sense.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you actually want to know more about Todd Noy and the excitement of Drago and Mountains We Stand, I would recommend taking a listen to Finding Drago, which is about 2 years old now. It's 8 parts, and it is a roller coaster of a ride. We haven't even touched on some of the really weird stuff that happens along the way. And then once you've finished listening to Finding Drago, I would heartily recommend their follow-up podcast, Finding Desperado, which deals with him tracking down a reference in the Guinness Book of Record for the youngest person ever nominated for a prize for making a commercial film. And that story goes in a lot of very weird places. Very weird places indeed.
Oh, well, maybe I should check it out. Maybe you should check it out.
I've already checked it out, and I'm actually happy to check it out again.
Well, there we go. Okay, well, I just before we start, is there more? Is there any more?
I mean, last time I had a whole bunch of Shakespearean stuff to go into, but no, that is basically
okay. Well, that was quite a ride, I'll have to say. And yes, well done, I guess. Something I hadn't heard of. Something I'm almost certain my life is better for actually hearing now. So.
Yeah. Todd Noy / David Alat. I actually probably should have listened back to the episode where they introduced him to get his last name correct. I was so pleased that I'm pronouncing Alexei Toliopoulos' name correctly. That actually a standard English name. I'm now going, is it really just Alat? Now I'm going, I really need to spend more time writing down how people's names are pronounced, because really it is my absolute weakness, and it's going to be an absolute weakness when I'm in China, so I just have to get used to it.
Yep. No, well.
Get used to preparing things properly.
Yes. Right, well, I think another successful episode of What the Conspiracy. We need more stings. We do. We actually do need a What the Conspiracy sting. If anyone has a suggestion for a sting for What the Conspiracy, or indeed a better name for the segment, please do write in. We always appreciate your emails. One thing we don't appreciate is the constant replies we get to that one single podcast we did on Uncle Sam's Snuff Factory. Uncle Sam's Snuff Factory, which continues to get about a comment a week on YouTube by people who are either telling us that we're ignoring the truth of what she says, or this week, thank you for drawing attention with your critical faculties. It'll help get the message out about what she's saying, which was kind of suggestive of they think that we agree with her. It was very weird indeed. It is. I'm assuming, therefore, that the Uncle Sam's Snuff Factory conspiracy is the most obscure one we've ever covered, given that it seems like this podcast is the only time anyone's actually talked about it, other than the people involved in the conspiracy theorizing themselves. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's actually something right for us to go back and look at to see whether the story's changed at all, or whether it's still the same old. Now, that's the end of this episode. But of course, we have a bonus episode for our lovely patrons who give us money and they allow us to furnish ourselves with these magical podcasting devices and all that sort of stuff. Now, a thing that we managed to go this entire episode without mentioning is that we're recording this on January the 21st New Zealand time. Or the evening of January the 20th US time. And you might have noticed that something happened in America on January the 20th. US time.
Was it an earthquake?
Probably. I don't
Volcanic
know.
eruption?
It's-
Forest fire? No, tsunami? Oil spill? Penguin attack?
Yes.
Penguin attack.
Yes. No, so the I guess momentous events of January the 20th will be what we're discussing in the bonus episode. Last week we had assumed things would get a bit rowdier, I think. So our basic plan was we were just going to sit here refreshing our Twitter feed and checking the news sites to see what sorts of craziness have happened with the inauguration of President Joe Biden. Just giving the game away there.
Or possibly the inauguration of Donald Trump wearing Joe Biden's skin.
So, yeah, basically I think there's enough to talk about for an entire bonus episode there. And so that's what we're going to do.
So yes, if you're a patron, you can tune into that as soon as I've uploaded it after uploading this episode. And if you're not a patron, well, the details about becoming a patron will be coming up very shortly in a sting, which just requires me to press a single button.
Right. Well,
With a
then
single button, I can sting.
Well, before you press that single button then, I think we should probably do the polite and civil thing and say goodbye.
Vladivostok.
The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy is Josh Addison and me, Dr. M.R.X. Dentith. You can contact us at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com, and please do consider supporting the podcast via our Patreon. And remember, the truth is out there, but not quite where you think you left it.